This last part is perhaps a bit more theoretical, but as I said, I'm going to share the slides with you so that you have them. Once we have all of the ideas, I hope you are seeing my screen. Yes? Can you give me a heads up?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Once you have all of your ideas and you know what you're writing about, then we have to start writing. So we have to put all of these ideas into a shape that people are going to understand. Because all of these notes that you have been putting now and ideas that you have been sharing, they are not good when we think of sharing. So we need to write. We need to create a document. Now, why do we do that? Because really, with a document, we can share a lot. We can reach a lot of people. I can speak for hours in front of you, and I can see that there are like 40 or 50 persons listening to me. But if I write a story, you can share that story, and maybe I can reach thousands of people. So writing really helps when we are thinking of outreach. You can reach many, many more people than by talking. And at the same time, by writing, we are able to store the information because you can save it as an article in your computers or in a printed document, and then you are able to share it also later on. So writing helps in many, many ways. The question is that writing is not so easy. And there you agree with me. None of us are writers. We are agronomists. We are not writers. We do not study to write. So we write as an additional task, let's say. Now, one of the best recommendations when we want to write better is to follow some tips. And many times I give the same example. In many ways, writing is just like playing football. Some people play football very nice, and some people play football not so nice. And they like to play football, but they are never going to go into the national team. Writing is the same. Some people write nice, others write because they have to, but they are never going to win a prize. Now, like with football, if you don't know how to play football, but you really like it, the best way is to practice and to follow some tips. No, so you go and you look at some videos of Cristiano Ronaldo or, I don't know, Messi or whoever, and you can learn a little bit by looking at how they do it. So with writing, we try to do the same. We just copy and we follow some tips. So let us say that we follow some 4 principles, which are what you have in this screen. The article, we have to try to make it easy to read. I know this sounds easier said than done, but you have to think of the readers. Readers like simple language. Readers don't like when you put a lot of acronyms. Readers don't like it when you put very long sentences because you get lost. So when we talk about a good article, it's basically an article which is easy to read. Yes? In the same way, when we talk about a good article is one which is concise, which doesn't take 20 pages to say something which is very short. The shorter, the better. You have to avoid putting a lot of unnecessary information. You have to provide facts. Your text has to be accurate. And as we say, you have to go to the point. So try to avoid a lot of blah, 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 which doesn't say anything. The shorter, the better. Yes? And that all of this you know, because maybe you don't write so much, but all of us read a lot. So you know what you like. When you are reading an article, you know what article you find better than another. So think of those ideas. What is it that you like in an article? And those are the things that we have to repeat, to try to repeat as writers. So we said the first, it has to be readable. The second, it has to be concise. The third, it has to be attractive. Just like one of you was making a very attractive presentation an hour ago, the article has to be attractive. It has to capture the attention. It has to be interesting. It has to invite readers to continue reading. Those who write in the newspaper are very good in this because they put a very nice heading at the beginning or in the front page, or they put a very nice photo. And in that way, they invite the reader to read further on. And you have to try the same, of course. And the fourth, and perhaps the most important principle, is that your article has to be rigorous. So it has to be credible. People have to believe what you're saying. You have to provide evidence. You have to validate whatever you are saying. If you just say, oh, rabbits are fantastic, and you do not say why, people are not going to believe you. They are not going to continue reading what you're saying. Now, so the trick is, how do we try to fulfill these principles? This is something that we have to try. And now you have only 2 weeks to do it, but I'm sure you can do it if we follow some basic tips and ideas. How? How do we go about this? I would say the best thing is to think of 3 phases. We start by preparing ourselves, like we're doing right now. The second part, you do the writing. And the third part, which is just as important, you look for feedback. Now let us look in detail at one of these. Prepare. Before any writing, you have to stimulate your ideas. You have to think. You have to pick your brains. And that is exactly what we're doing right now. I'm asking you a few questions just to pick your brains, to get you to start thinking about the subject, to start remembering some things that you did in the past, to start thinking about your experience, etc. That is all super useful. And then the next thing is that you need to organize your ideas. Now, going back to the first one, how do you stimulate your thinking? By talking a lot about your subject, by writing down your ideas, as I was asking you, on a piece of paper, or perhaps by doing this exercise of free writing, in which you just get a pen and a pencil and start writing, whatever, without any commas, without any full stops, without any worries, just so that your brain starts producing more ideas. Now, so basically, what we're trying to say here is that preparing to write means thinking a lot about the subject that you are interested in writing about. And then, of course, you need to start organizing. So if you think, oh, I'm going to write an article, you already have to start thinking, how long is it going to be? How many words? What's going to be the structure of this article? Am I going to write, I don't know, in very formal English, or I'm going to write maybe in an informal way? Am I going to put photos? How do I put the title? No, you have to start visualizing it a little bit before you do any of the writing. Yes? And then, of course, comes the difficult part, which is the writing itself. So what I would say is that you follow these sets of ideas, and you start with something that we have here in the previous phase. Let me go back, which is a sort of template, an outline, sorry. So when you are going to start writing, it will help you if you start visualizing what will be the outline of my article. So you start introduction, description, analysis, conclusions, I don't know. No, but some sort of order, which is something that we always do, but we do it in our heads. Even when you write an email, before you write an email, you start thinking, first I say, dear Jorge, then I say this, then I say that, but we do it automatically in our heads without much thinking. Now I would like you to think a little bit more of how you visualize this article. When you start writing, the first thing that we need to do is to expand this outline. So you have your outline, then you start putting all those ideas within each of the headings or subheadings that you have. You need to think of where do you have more details, where do you need to put more details, where are you going to get information for each one of the sections of your article. And then it also helps if you say, chapter 2, okay, this chapter is going to be about this and that and that. Chapter 3, this is going to be about this and that and that. So that you help yourself make sure that you are putting the right information into the right place. And then you also think a little bit in terms of proportions, in the sense that your introduction, for example, should not be bigger than the analysis, because the analysis is much more important. The problem is that we always start with the introduction, so we have more time and more energy, and then we end up writing articles which have 5 pages of introduction and 1 page of analysis, and that doesn't really make sense. So you have to be very careful and make sure that you put a very short introduction and a very big analysis, because that's the most interesting part. Yes, are you following me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we are following you.
Yes, we are following you.
After you start filling your outlines, a bit like this gentleman is doing in the photo. No, you have the outline and then you start filling, okay, here I put this, here I put that, here I put that. And you start more or less, in that sense, organizing your ideas. And then you can say that for each section, you write a sort of introduction. So then you say, okay, what I was saying, in chapter 1, you put this, in chapter 2, you put that. And in that way, you invite the reader to read what comes next. No, so now you are not just putting the ideas, you are already writing. You are creating the article with all the ideas that you have, but you do it bit by bit, per section, and then starting with the introduction. I'm going to talk about this, in this chapter I'm talking about this, and then you start telling it. And you fill it up. And with this filling it up, you prepare a first draft. The first draft has to be as complete as possible, but do not worry about editing. Do not worry about spelling mistakes. Do not worry about the details. Just worry about the content. Is it there? Is it complete? Does it make sense? Are all my ideas in place or not? No, so think about, as the name says, as a draft. And then I would advise you to leave it for a day. Don't look at it, because the more we look at it, the more that we don't see any mistakes. So just prepare a draft and leave it for a day and start thinking about something else. When we are writing, and when we prepare this first draft, it's always convenient to follow a few tips. So I try to put a few ones here, but for example, use everyday language. Add some photos, add some diagrams. Think of nice titles. No, you have to put some headings here and there. Think of titles which are inviting. Use some bullet points when you need to put a lot of lists or a lot of information. Try to compare how it is here versus how it is there, how it was in the past versus how it is in the present or in the future. You have to add some data, numbers. It's always good to put numbers. And at the same time, it's always good to put some quotes. So to mention what people are saying, like a statement with quotation marks. All those things make it for a more lively article, for a more interesting one, but also for a more credible one. And at the same time, there are some things that you really, really have to try to avoid. So don't use words which nobody understands. Try to avoid all these acronyms, because people don't know it. And if they don't know it, they don't understand it. And if they don't understand it, they don't like your article. Try, of course, not to use offensive language. You cannot say things for which somebody may be offended. Try not to exaggerate, and especially don't say things which are not true. You have to try to avoid that the reader loses focus, that get lost into perhaps you're putting too much information. And try to avoid all these subdivisions, or like having small chapters and another chapter and another chapter, because that only confuses the reader. And so basically, try to write with simple language. It doesn't have to be informal, but it has to be simple. It has to be easy to read. As I was telling you, I was working as an editor. And we used to get articles from farmers, and we used to get articles from researchers at the university. To be honest, I preferred the articles from farmers. I hated the articles from the researchers because many times, not always, of course, but many times they were so complicated that I couldn't understand what they were saying. And if I couldn't understand them, I couldn't edit them. And I thought maybe this article is far too scientific and too difficult for the regular reader. So, of course, it was because I was not working in a scientific magazine, but you have to think of the reader all the time and what is it that he or she wants to read, and make it easy for him or for herself so that he is going to read it. Otherwise, we are not winning. Once you have the draft, and you leave it rest for a little bit, then you need to revise it. And then you need to check it. What I was just saying, is this good for the target audience? Is it convincing? Is it, do I need more evidence perhaps? Are there details? And then you go back and you think of all these principles that we were saying a few minutes ago. Is it, complete? Is it rigorous? Is it attractive? No, and then you start thinking for yourself, and you start thinking, how do I improve the way that the information is presented? But most of all, you have to think of the content at this moment. Is it complete? Is this really a good representation of my experience? And especially think of the analysis. Am I answering the why question? That is the most important thing. Am I really saying why is it good or not? And then, of course, you write the conclusions. You write the introduction that comes at the end, in which you summarize the key points. And you say, okay, this is what I have found. And at this moment is when you go back to this idea that we were saying about the shoes at the beginning. Am I showing new, relevant, different? Am I really showing that my experience is so interesting? This is the most important test, because remember, that's where we started. If you're going to talk about your shoes, talk about it in showing that they are new, that they are relevant, that they are interesting. So this is what you have to test with your experience now and with your article. Is it new? Is it different? Is it relevant for the readers? And if not, then you have to go back and try to improve your draft a little bit more. Then, only then, you go for the editing. So only then, once you are full of the sure of the content, you go to the language, the style, the grammar, the spelling mistakes, and all of that. This is very important, because it is very annoying to read an article which is full of spelling mistakes. So you have to do it. But you do it at the end, not before, because otherwise you're going to be spending time editing a text that maybe you will be deleting it. It is only at the end that you start looking about the overall presentation, the font, the letter size, the graphics, etc. And many times we ask for help here because we are not all editors. So you can ask for somebody who puts it very nicely. So I would say this is very important, but it is something that you only do at the end. Yes, so once you're writing, of course, think that it has to be concise, it has to be complete, it has to be accurate, but it also has to be easy and very interesting to read. No, because, yeah, at the end of the day, we are also trying to entertain the reader, to make it easy, to make it nice, to make it an enjoyable experience to read your article. But then we come to the third part, which, as I say, it is just as important. So I would really, really, really advise you to dedicate some time for this, which is to get feedback. Once you have your second draft, make sure that you share it with somebody. And share it with your colleagues, share it with your wife, share it with your husband, share it with your brother, share it with your neighbor, share it with whoever. But share it and try to get feedback from these other persons, because this is going to be very, very useful. And you have to try to get feedback in terms of the content. So ask these persons, is my article complete? Is there perhaps too much information? Is it really so much that it is distracting the reader? Or is it okay? Now, so ask your colleague, your husband, your brother, your neighbor, your friend, your boss, whoever, to invest a little bit of time to help you reading and to provide you this information. In the same way, ask about the organization of the text. Does it really follow? Is it logical? Do the ideas follow? Or is it maybe confusing? Maybe you're skipping some part, or maybe from chapter 2, you should go to chapter 5 because chapter 4 doesn't really relate to it. How is it? Is there a better way to organize this information? This is all something that an external reader can tell you. Is it interesting? That's the other more important question. Is it really appealing? Does the reader find it? Well, is he or she willing to read? And is it well edited? Of course. You know, so once again, now we start looking about the one of these principles. Is the article appealing, or is it okay, yeah, the subject about the rabbits, that's very interesting, but wow, it's a bit heavy. No, so this is very difficult to characterize and to put concrete indicators, but when you read an article, you immediately notice if you like it or if you don't like it, if it is heavy or if it is easy to read or not. So when we are the writers, we don't notice that, which is why we have to ask somebody else to do it for us. I'm sure you have had it many times that you write something and you find it fantastic. You leave it there for a couple of years and then you read it and you feel embarrassed. No, I'm thinking of my university thesis. I was so proud of it, and then I read it now and I think, oh, wow, how could I ever write such nonsense? So boring. It happens. So in the same way with a short article, it happens. But how do we prevent this? By simply asking somebody to help us. And then the most important part, this person can also help you to see if your arguments are strong. Are they logical? Are they consistent? Are they convincing? Do you have the evidence or not? If you are only saying, yeah, rabbits are fantastic, and you are not providing evidence, your article is not going to be a good success. So you have to, well, the idea of getting some feedback is to get some help there before you submit it. So make sure that you have a message, and make sure that everything that you put into this article points toward that message. And remember, the most important part, put arguments. Every time you have to try to convince the reader. Convince the reader that what you're saying is good. And with this, I'm finishing here, but with this, you come back to the beginning of the presentation, that you are, when writing an article, in one way or another, you become salesman. You become a salesperson, to put it correctly. You are trying to sell an idea. Just as somebody who tries to sell something on the shops, you are trying to sell an idea. So you have to be convincing. If you just say, yeah, well, my article, yeah, it's more or less, Nobody's going to read it. But if you really come with arguments and you put them in a very strong way, people are going to read it and they're going to love it, and everybody will want to publish your article. So you have to be convincing. And in order to do that, you have to put data and you have to put opinions and you have to really show that what you're saying is the best that there is. You have the experience. You are the experts. Now you have to be convincing in showing and putting all of that in paper. So we're coming to the end, but we're starting the writing process. So the assignment, what I would like to do and what I would like you all to try for next week is that on the basis of everything that we have been talking today, start the outline of your article. Remember, the article, which has to be of a very interesting case, which has to have a description, which has to have an analysis, which has to have conclusions, lessons, and recommendations. So let us start by making the outline. No? As we have just said, when we have to write, we start by the outline. So I would like you, if you can all, we meet again next week, and you have this outline ready. And I'm putting here just a few ideas, but maybe you can think of it in a different way. It doesn't really matter. You choose the outline, but basically we have to have some introduction. No? First, a presentation. What is this, or what is it about, and who are you, and blah blah blah. Then an introduction to the case. What are you talking about? Why are you selecting this? Where is it happening? Why have you chosen? When did the experience take place? All of those ideas that we mentioned during at the beginning earlier today. Then you describe, you say what you did, and you say what was the result. Now remember, comparing the initial situation, the intervention, and the final situation, what it is now. What have been the results? What is the impact? What is the change? And then you come to the most interesting part, which is the analysis. Why? There was change. Why was there change? What were the factors that contributed to this change? And on the basis of this fantastic analysis that you will be doing, you make some conclusions and recommendations. So we start with this outline. The better the outline, the easier it is to write the article afterwards. So what I would like you all to try is to prepare this. Follow all these small mini assignments that we had during the day and start writing, preparing an assignment like this one for next week. Yes? Andre, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jörg. I think that the assignment is quite clear. Is there any question regarding this assignment first, before we go to more general questions? I think it's very clear. Also, please note that the presentation will be shared.
Yes.
Yeah. So next step is on the 1st of October, same hour. Unfortunately, we had to do it on Friday because of many constraints from trainer and from some organization aspects. So we'll have it on a Friday, but we hope that we'll be able to attend that session. There was one question maybe that we should address before we close, or I don't know if it's too early to ask it, but one question that came maybe 2 times today is how long should be this presentation, the story that we will write? And I think, yeah, Jörg has some ideas about it, but the authors, we participants here have also our say on that, what we think. We don't want to force everyone here to write a 100-page story, but we don't want also stories that shows that we are doing it in a rush and just to expedite something. We really want to bring some value to the APAS network and to the Agriculture and Research for Development network at a larger scale. So maybe, I don't know if someone has something to say about it. In any case, this publication will be more digital. So there will be just some samples during the launch. This is what is proposed for now, and that to be launched during the extension week. And we'll have, I don't know, maybe 50 samples and hard copies to be given to the key participants there. But it will be more digitally widely spread across all the different organizations and the channels that we are using. So the size doesn't matter too much, whether it's 100 pages or 10 pages, but it's really up to us to decide how big, how serious, how appealing, how consumable it will be for our audience, I think. So the floor is open, maybe 2-3 inputs about that, and then we try to close the session. Yeah, Beatrice. Beatrice is...
Yes, it is about the assignment, because it says the presentation and then the ones from number 2 to 5. I was wondering, I thought the presentation is about all those ones down. Is the presentation different?
Yeah. By presentation, I mean like the presentation of the article itself. What is this? Where are you submitting it? Who are you? A bit of the general. Yeah, it's similar to the introduction, but the introduction introduces the experience, while the presentation introduces the article itself. That it is something that you are submitting to this conference, that you wrote it, I don't know, during the past 2 weeks, something very short.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems Dr. Selim wants to say something.
I think I would imagine these are not scientific writings. These are sort of case studies.
Yes.
Of these things, and in case studies, and especially if you're having so many articles, I think Jörg gave a very good, indicator of how many pages. I think 20 pages will be too many, and probably less than 10 probably would be okay. Let's say maybe between 5 to 10. But the other thing is, in case studies, usually there are pictorials, and so on. So I don't know. Maybe Jörg, you can
yes,
pictorial pictures and so on.
Yes.
So maybe you can guide on that.
Yes. I would really strongly recommend you to put photos, and to put photos with a caption so that you show the name of the person in the photo, you identify, you really show that this is really, really coming from the field. I would also strongly recommend you to make it as short as possible, because remember what we said before, that these are case studies. And the case study is very unique because you're only talking about one family or one farmer or one district. So to make the case of what you are all doing as a group, you really need to have many case studies. So it is a collective exercise. But so the reader has to read many stories. If all of you write 400 pages, then the reader will have to read 20,000 pages, and that is not possible. So you have to put yourself on the shoes of the reader. I would say make short stories shorter and allow the reader to read many of these short stories. Now, short story doesn't mean 1 page, of course not, because in 1 page you cannot say anything. So my suggestion would be go for approximately not more than 2,000 words. So between 1,500 and 2,000 words. I think that should be enough for you to put a nice story, to give all the evidence, to write as much as possible, but then it also makes it easy to read and very attractive and very interesting for the reader. 2,000 words, yeah, depends of course on how you put it, but that's basically, in a printout, it's around 4 pages, 4 or 5 pages.
Yes,
Yes.
Dr. Mercy. Input on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want us to actually specify the range, which George has just done, between 1,500 and 2,000 words, which to me, it's very okay. In that, we can always tell the good story and capture all those elements that we need to capture. But as we tell, as we look into case studies, I think for the extension world now, we also want to capture some, not really, real research, but some action research oriented work that we have done. Action research involving communities on CSA. So not only a case study, but, action research with simple, technical jargons that everybody can understand. This is what I want to say. Thank you.
No, I agree with you. I think it's interesting if you show real life experiences where people have been involved in the field, the farmers you work with. Of course, not only farmers, you may also have involved other people, but try to put it as an experience and not as abstract ideas. I think that in this case, if I think of myself as a reader, I am more interested in reading what people have been doing, more than just reading abstract ideas or theories that I don't know where are they coming from. Yes.
Yes, I think we are coming to the end of this first session, and thank you very much, Jorg, for sharing your experience and sharing all this knowledge. Maybe some final words from our ED to close this this training, and thank you all also for participating, and we are continuing our interaction in the WhatsApp group. By the way, please share your email in the email address in the WhatsApp group, or your CIKM should share your email address so that we can forward all the presentations to the authors here. Over to you, Dr. Selim.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andre and Jorg. I think he has really taken us through the outlines of what we should expect, and certainly they have already some indications of some very interesting case studies that will come up involving. Mercy, thank you very much for being there from Sakawa, and I really appreciate it, and we are hopeful that very good case studies will come. It will be one of a kind, and really, Andre, it's good you have pushed it, and yeah, we expect something real. Let's keep on it, and we really show it and we can write, and of course, what they have done and what is coming from the field, and as a learning experience. So thank you very much.